Honorable Alex Mood, we're former CEO of GNPC. Honorable, good morning and thanks for having me.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very good, and how are you too, sir?
Everything is cozy.
You okay? It's been a while. Where have you been, sir?
I've been at home. I'm relaxing.
Relaxing? Yeah. So, you are just like somebody who is watching in brief in court as an officer of the court or a lawyer. You've sat down behind the scenes watching how these energy issues are, propelling. What do you make of the recent developments, sir?
First of all, I think that the recent developments that we are seeing with the erratic lights of, as it is called nowadays, or as we know it as doomsaw, should not be happening. And the main reason is, when you have doomsaw, you have a technical issue and you have a financial issue. And the technical issue is when your plants are down on unplanned maintenance because you did not maintain them in the past, or you don't have enough generation capacity. By 2015, early 2016, the Mahama government had put in place a lot of generation and a lot of programs to restore the unfunctioning plants, the plants which were down and were not functioning, which caused us not to have enough capacity to generate electricity. Secondly, we had the ENI gas coming in. We had also the Tolo gas coming in. So we had enough gas in the western region to produce electricity. We also had put in place the ESLA, which was to take care of ring-fence debt. That means old debt in the industry, which mounted to something close to 1 point something billion. The ESLA, which is paid through the petroleum products, which is like super and diesel, we pay a tax to the government, which is put in an ESLA account, which then takes care of this old debt. So we shouldn't have a problem in capacity because there's enough capacity to do that. And we have even signed up with the help of the World Bank to bring in more capacity to ensure that we have offtake of gas that is going to be produced by ENI and the Jubilee partners as well as the 10 partners. All of this should not create a situation where we don't have enough plants to produce. The problem is that the gas plants were going under maintenance. Atwabo was going under maintenance, and also you had the Tolo also going under maintenance. So at the same time, you didn't have enough gas to produce electricity in the west. So you had to make sure that you had gas being transferred to the east, and also you had gas coming from N-Gas in Nigeria. And the places that you don't have enough gas and they had the capacity to produce from crude oil, you should have put in place financial instruments to satisfy the suppliers so that they continue supplying you crude oil. The challenge has become that they did not put in place all of this. They did not plan it, although they knew that we were going to have shutdowns for the Jubilee field, and also Atwabo was going under maintenance. There was going to be tie-in of the pipelines. Car power was supposed to be moved from Tema to Takrady. That meant that you'd have to invest in a pipeline for gas to supply the gas to car power, and you also have to provide a substation to receive the electricity that was produced from car power, because apparently it was not the substation in Takrady or in Sekendi where the plant is going to be put was not sufficient to evacuate the electricity produced. All that was in the handing over notes by the NDC government in 2017 January, and if they had followed with the script, we wouldn't be having this problem now. I think it is mainly due to planning.
Yeah, sir, one of the reasons assigned to this fluctuation of power supply is that it did not make reasoning that you transport power or the gas all the way from Atwabo to the car power plant. So now what they are doing is that they are realigning the power supply chain by moving it to nearer to where the gas is. Is that not a prudent measure?
That was the plan. It was a plan that we handed over to them. It's not something that they came up with. This is a plan that we always knew we had to get the plants into Takoradi. But the second plant arrived, as you remember, in 2017. It did not arrive in 2016. There were supposed to be two barges, one in Tema and one in Takoradi. When we decided that we would have one barge, we said that for prudency, we will move that barge to Takoradi. This was all part of the discussions that we had with the World Bank in financing plants. We also looked to finance 4 different plants in the Takoradi enclave to ensure that we could evacuate the gas from ENI. It was one of the conditions under which the World Bank supported the ENI project with their largest guarantee ever in the world of over $700 million. So these plans are not new plans. There are no new plans they have. These are handed over to them in our handing over notes as to what we had put in place. Another thing we had put in place is that we have to reverse the gas.
So to put it on record, is the plan that was handed over to them by the XY NDC and they are only executing it?
Exactly. And that is how governments behave. You have to hand over a plan. You don't have these plans in ad hoc. These plans are worked with the institutions. They are worked with the technical people in the institutions. So these are plans of the institutions, and these are plans that the government, through its policies, ensure that these plans can be executed. GNPC was to raise money because Ghana Gas did not have the balance sheet to raise money to do the reverse flow of gas from Takoradi to Tema, because we have plants in Tema that can only use gas, like Sono and Asogli. It can only use gas. We have another plant in Tema that can only use gas. We are not getting enough gas from Nigeria, and their gas is far cheaper than the gas we are getting from combined gas we're getting from the Jubilee 10 and ENI. So it's prudent that we move the gas, excess gas we have in Takoradi, until these plants, which I told you earlier, was supported by the World Bank and Government of Ghana to raise the financing so that the IPPs can build plants in the Takoradi enclave.
Sir, how come a gas that is transported all the way from Nigeria to Ghana is cheaper than our own? How come?
Well, that is also not true. If you look at how much it costs us to land the gas in Tema, and you look at how much it costs us to pay ENI for their share of the gas, you will see that it is cheaper for us to have gas, coming from our fields. Our fields, the new field we have, the ENI field, is a gas field. It is not an associated gas field. A gas field means that you mostly only produce gas, and that is the economics of the gas development is based on how much gas you can produce and how much it costs you to produce.
Okay.
In Nigeria, they have excess gas. They flare the gas. They have no use for the gas. They are now trying to have a domestic use of their gas. So their gas is quite cheap. But landing it in Tema, you still have to pay for a high pipeline cost and other costs, which doesn't make it cheaper than the gas coming from ENI or the gas coming, especially the gas coming from Jubilee and 10.
Sir, is it true that Ghanaians are paying $40 million each month for cow power?
Well, I don't know what we are paying cow power, but the way you have to look at it is per kilowatt of electricity or per megawatt of electricity that is produced by each of the IPPs, who is the cheapest and who is the most expensive. The amount you pay really depends on the amount they are giving you. So if I give you 1,000 megawatts of electricity and somebody gives you 2 megawatts of electricity, of course you'll be paying me more than you pay the other person. The real indicator you should use to judge whether one plant is cheap, is more cost efficient than the other is the unit cost of electricity produced.
Sir, the management of our electricity has now transited from ECG to the PDS. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think it was always in the plan to have a private sector, public sector partnership in seeing how we can revamp ECG. One of the ways is to give certain portions of the more difficult and more inefficient parts of ECG to a private sector company to run. Because it's very difficult for ECG and government-run organizations to stand up to the Minister of Finance or to the Minister of Energy and saying, we will not do what you are asking us to do because it is not the right business practice. So, for example, government hasn't paid ECG maybe 20% of what ECG has billed it. You can't do that to a private sector. The private sector will ensure that you have got a financial instrument to pay. So basically, it's the discipline of government and the people they put in to manage places like ECG and the boards they put in who are basically cannot go against what the Minister of Finance says or what the Minister of Energy says. When you have a private sector and they have an agreement with you, you have given them key performing indicators that you want them to achieve this. If you interfere with them achieving it, then you have no recourse to fire them or to charge them for doing something wrong. And this is one of the things we have in many SOEs, because most of the times the boards and the top management, the CEO, who is normally politically appointed, cannot stand toe-to-toe, boot for boot with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Energy. And they receive instructions, and they have to carry out those instructions because they will get fired if they don't carry out the instructions. And most times those instructions are not good for the state and are not good for the companies that are being run. Private companies will not take that crap.
Sir, our president spoke of the $2.2 billion debt, that is the energy debt, and how government is taking steps to, to clear off that debt. In your time, what were the measures then? And now, what do you see as the present measure?
Okay. Just to clarify that point, there is nothing new that this government has done to clear the debt. And let me explain why.
Why?
In 2015, ESLA was approved by the Mahama government as a levy in the petroleum price build-up, and that money, when collected, was supposed to be used to pay down the ring-fence debt, which was ring-fenced somewhere in 2016. That means all owed debt, any debt on the balance sheet, all owed debt was supposed to be taken care of by ESLA. There were two ways you can do it. You can use ESLA immediately and raise the money up front and pay the existing parties in the value chain of the power sector, or you can do it in tranches. We started doing this in 2016. I think we raised two tranches of money to pay using the ESLA securitized mechanism. And when the NPP came into government in 2017, it was in the handing over notes at the Ministry of Finance and in the Ministry of Energy that they should continue this particular way and bring down the debt using this system. And that is the system they have been using.
Sir, if somebody meets you, Mr. Alex Mode, and said that Ghanaians were in doom so well over 2 years, and now we are experiencing these minute power fluctuations, and you make hay out of it, what would be your response?
My response will be very clear. Doomsaw, we arrived at Doomsaw somewhere in in the early 2010s. And this was a result of lack of proper maintenance, lack of ensuring that the sector had enough money. That means that they charged the right rates and also they collected and were efficient so that they could use the money, the profits that they make, and plow it back into the sector to increase maintenance and ensure that we have the right operations and maintenance done in these plants. So, and you also know that we had Doomsop also because Akosombo, there was very little water coming from Akosombo, and we're firing on 1 or 2 of the turbines rather than firing on 5 and 6 as they're firing right now. So it was a total different ball game. We also put in place a lot on bringing in a lot of capacity to ensure that the old capacity, which was now being refurbished, we could take our time and refurbish them so that they could come on stream when we needed them. We also put in place the E&I gas, getting E&I gas in, and also ensuring that we had Atwabo to process the Jubilee gas and also to have a pipeline, bring the gas into Takoradi. So a lot of these things were put in place, and as you know, it materialized in 2016. We didn't have Doomsaw. We didn't have Doomsaw in 2016. From somewhere mid-2016, there was no Doomsaw. So why we're having Doomsaw now is mind-boggling. And the reason is that they did not plan adequately to put in place the necessary financial instruments to bring in crude oil because it's expensive and they did not have the money to do that. And you know,
you attribute it to, financial incapability to, finance the crude that we put in the various genset or whatever.
I have attributed it to a lack of proper planning because we knew that the Atwabo plant will go under maintenance. That means no gas will be coming from them. We also knew that they had to be tied in. So we knew how these things were going to take place and we knew how they were scheduled. To do that, you have to make sure you have adequate plans to bring in alternate fuels to fuel the plants that are going to generate the electricity. One of the things that they've done is they've run down Akosombo so much that we may have a problem in the future. We are not managing the water levels properly. That is because instead of bringing in crude oil so that we have the right mix of thermal and hydro, they ran down the hydro so much that we could have problems in the future. And that main reason was financial. They didn't have enough financial capability to raise the letters of credit, or they decided that it is better to run down Akosombo rather than finance crude oil, which would have effect on the revenue profile that they were expecting.
Oh, okay. Sir, if you were to advise government on these current energy issues, what do you put forth on the table?
Well, what I would ask them to do is to let GNPC do what it's supposed to do. GNPC is supposed to raise money and handle the evacuation of gas projects. 1. 2, they should have more adequate planning and they should put in place the necessary financial instruments. They should use ESLA very well as it is supposed to be used to pay down the ring fence debt. And they should come up to Ghanaians and tell us exactly how they have used the ESLA money from inception to date. How much money they raised, who they paid down, when they paid down, and what is the current status of the debt that they put in. Have they incurred new debt? Has new debt been incurred? Is the PURC pricing properly? Are we paying the right price for fuel, for electricity? Are the various players in the sector efficient? Are they meeting the KPIs, the key performing indicators? All of these things were in the handing over notes, and all of these things have to be carried out in any business that wants to be a high performing business.
Okay. Sir, lastly, comparatively, looking at how the NDC government performed in the energy sector and looking at what is happening now, and Ghanaians are now going to vote based on these energy issues. Do you think that the NDC will have a place in the election than the NPP?
Okay, FM.
Well, I think you have to look at it in retrospect, and also what were the challenges facing the NDC, and what are the challenges facing the NPP. It may be wrong to just look at it and say, oh, it seems as if they had more electricity than in the NDC time. The NDC definitely had far more challenges at their time than the NPP had. The NPP inherited a solved problem. Doomsor was solved when the NPP came into the country. Solved in the fact that we had put in place ESLA to take care of the financial issues. We had asked for a cash waterfall to be put in place. They have taken over 26 months to put in the cash waterfall. I just heard Cabinet approve the cash waterfall. I don't see why a Cabinet should approve a cash waterfall. It is a sector-driven thing, and PURC was supposed to do it. Cash waterfall just means that when the revenue comes in from ECG, how is that revenue shared among all the players, and what is the priority given to which player? To the fuel suppliers, are they paid first? Is the generation paid second? Is Gridco paid third? And is ECG now PPDA or PSD or PDS? Are they paid next? You know, if ECG is paid first, then of course the person who is supplying the fuel will not be paid, and he will stop supplying the fuel. So you will have generation. You will have the generation capacity in your country. You have the distribution lines in your country. But there will be nothing going through them because you don't have the fuel. Okay. So common sense and logic tells you that you make sure that you always have fuel. That means you do not pay the fuel supplier, because he is also asking his banks to finance him. The moment his banks realize that the money they gave the fuel supplier to buy the fuel, and he gave it to you, and you are using that money to pay somebody in the past instead of using it to pay the person who gave you the fuel, the banks are going to stop financing you. When the banks stop financing you, because the international world is wired in such a way that everybody knows what everybody is doing, you will not have credit worthiness. That means nobody will want to lend to you. Nobody will want to give you fuel, whether it's crude oil or gas. And that is the problem that we have to ensure as a government that we never find ourselves in. Unfortunately, for some reason, although we have all these financial gurus in the government, some reason they fail to understand that you have to pay the fuel supplier, and you have to have an arrangement with him where his financial institution is satisfied that you will pay in a timely manner, and they will be secured ahead of other people to be paid, because theirs is short-term where other people is long-term. So we have to get the efficiency in the sector. The whole sector has to be more efficient. They have to make sure that when they produce 100 cedis of electricity, they collect more than 100 cedis of electricity, because they have to pay other people like the distribution. And that means they collect more than that 100 cedis of electricity, so that everybody in the line gets paid. Otherwise, we will put ourselves in a situation where we have a credit worthiness problem in the power sector, and no bank, no financial institution will want to continue financing unless, of course, government of Ghana guarantees the payment, which then becomes another problem, because government of Ghana doesn't have that currency to continue guaranteeing payments, if knowing that it is causing that own problem. The World Bank and the IMF are going to come back and say, no, you cannot do that.
Oh, okay. So it means Ghanaians are not paying the realistic prices for the energy they consume.
I am not saying that. I'm saying that the PURC have to come very clear that, look, for every gigawatt or megawatt that is produced, this is the cost of production. Now, this is how we bill people, and behaviorally, we are billing people more than what is costing us to produce. If we are billing people, or if people are being charged less than what is being produced, you have losses in the industry. You know, if people are being billed more than what is being produced, which is the right thing, the next question is, are they paying? are you collecting the money? Because you can go and buy something for 5 cedis, but if you haven't paid it, the person who you bought the thing from, he can't say he really has made profit unless you actually finish paying him the money, because there's a probability that you won't pay him all the money. And that is the problem we've had. And that is why we've had this legacy debt. That is why we have had this ring-fence debt, because the system was inefficient, and also people have not paid. Now, we're waiting for these people to pay. Government is one of the largest in that debt that has not paid. It is not only individuals, residentials, and also factories, but government themselves, for the use of electricity, they have not paid a large chunk into, and they owe this whole value chain in the power sector.
Okay, sir, we thank you so much for talking to us, sir.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.